I'm Garvis Pollard. I'm a volunteer here at the St. Charles County Veterans Museum and a veteran myself. One of the great stories here in the museum deals with an individual from World War II. His name was Bud Haedike. Bud was 16 years old when Pearl Harbor was bombed. And at the time, he and his buddies all wanted to join, but of course were too young. But on his 18th birthday in 1943, he actually got his draft notice. And when he went out to sign up, the individuals there who were signing the individuals up to join were stamping them either Navy or Army. His first stamp showed Navy. Well, Bud said, you know, I can swim, I like the water, but man, I hate boats. So he begged the guy to re-stamp him. He finally gave in, and sure enough, he stamped Army. Now he was going to be in the United States Army. He went off to training at a couple of locations, including Jefferson Barracks. But Bud, when he was in training, was asked, would you like to join would you like to be in the Air Corps? At the time, the Army Air Corps was simply part of the Army. And he said, sure, he wanted to be a fighter pilot. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. After training, he was sent to Europe. And in Europe, he was assigned to become a bombardier on a B-17 Flying Fortress. Now, it was in the latter stages of the war, actually early in 1945, when Bud flew his first mission. That mission was in February, early February of 1945. The Army Air Corps, the 8th Air Force in Europe, actually had a maximum of 25 missions for young men to fly. The problem was most of them never made it past their 7th or 8th mission. As it turns out, roughly 3 out of 4 of the individuals who flew with the 8th Air Force in Europe never returned. You see, the survival rate was only about 25%. And on his first mission, amazingly, the plane was shot down. You see, the Germans had many so-called 88mm flak guns. Those flak guns simply put flak into the air. They could reach up to 25,000 feet. It was pretty difficult to escape all that shrapnel that occurred from the flak. In his first mission, they lost not one but 2 engines of the 4. And they were only able to fly on 2 or more engines. As it turns out, on the way back, they had to crash land. They landed in Belgium, and luckily, they landed in friendly territory. They crash landed, but nobody was really injured. But they had to wait 5 days before they were rescued and taken back to England. Now imagine on your first mission you had to crash land. You had all this flak coming at you. And yet, you know, you got to fly at least 24 more missions. That's an amazing amount of pressure. Before they left, what they did was turn in all their valuables. They had a great meal, they got a briefing, and then they got on the plane and flew the mission. Once they got back, they had a warm cot to sleep on. They had wonderful meals, but during that period of time, they were flying over Europe. They were in constant terror. Very, very difficult situation. Certainly would be for me. Bud and his crew went on to fly 23 combat missions. The amazing part of those missions had to do with the fact that they sometimes had escorts of the P-51 Mustang, but sometimes they didn't. At the end of March, I believe it was, they actually flew 5 straight days. An amazing amount of courage on the part of those individuals who had to go out and fly every single day. If you flew in one of the turrets where the machine guns were located, you, as you began your missions, were generally the newbies, the new guys on the street, so to speak. And those were tail-end Charlies, the last plane in the formation. And that formation, amazingly, was the worst part of the entire trip, because the German fighters could attack and knock out all the rear planes. And so Tail Gunner Charlie was where he flew on that first mission. It was an amazing amount of courage that all those guys showed, and I've always been amazed at it. Actually, although 25 missions were required, it just so happened that they only had to fly 23 missions, because luckily the war ended. It ended in early May 1945. But they did fly 3 more missions. Those 3 missions were to drop foodstuffs to the individuals in Holland, which we know today as the Netherlands. They flew very low. They could actually see people waving at them. And it was one of the great experiences, he said, of the entire war. When he came back to the United States, he actually had picked up some of the material from the war, some of his own material and some that perhaps they had confiscated. As it turns out, he had a stop in St. Louis before he reached his home of Chicago, and he dropped off that material, some of which we have here at the museum today. He went on to go on a blind date set up by a lady that he knew in Chicago, and as it turns out, they were married. Today they have at least 25 grandchildren. They live today in St. Charles County, and he's simply one of the heroes of this museum, and one of my favorite stories of the many, many great stories here locally.